Black woman was humiliated at her job interview until the CEO bowed and called her chairwoman. Imagine walking into a room full of people who've already decided you're not good enough before you've even said a word. That's exactly what happened to Maya Johnson. Maya, a 29-year-old Harvard MBA graduate, stepped into the towering glass lobby of one of Wall Street's most prestigious investment firms. She had spent years working for this moment, grueling nights studying, internships, at major banks, and leadership roles that showcased her brilliance. Dressed in a sharp black suit and heels that clicked confidently on the marble floor, she carried a sleek leather portfolio and a quiet sense of determination. Her name was on the interview schedule. She had been personally invited to the final round by a managing partner who praised her strategy paper in a business case competition. She belonged here, at least on paper. But reality greeted her differently. Before she could even make it to the front desk, the receptionist shot her a disapproving glance. Maya smiled politely, expecting a standard greeting. Instead, the woman squinted as though trying to place her. "You're here to drop off food?" the receptionist asked coldly, without even checking her list. Maya froze, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "No," she said after a pause. "I'm here for the interview." The receptionist's eyes widened for a second, but quickly narrowed. "Oh," she mumbled, clearly surprised. Just then, a soft burst of laughter echoed behind Maya. She turned slightly. 3 young men in identical navy suits leaned against a marble pillar, smirking. One of them whispered something. Another replied just loud enough to be heard. "I think she's lost." The third one glanced at her and scoffed. "Maybe she's with catering." Maya's stomach churned. Her face grew warm, but she stood taller, refusing to shrink. She reminded herself that she had earned this. She reminded herself of the nights spent studying in a tiny apartment, of her immigrant parents who sacrificed everything, of the mentors who told her to never let anyone shrink her story. "Would you like me to sign in?" Maya asked the receptionist calmly, her voice level. The receptionist handed her the pen without a word. Maya scribbled her name with purpose. As she waited for someone from HR to come escort her, she took a seat near the large windows. The 3 men walked past her, still chuckling. One of them glanced at her and said, "Good luck." It dripped with sarcasm. Maya didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because just then, a door swung open and a tall, silver-haired man walked out. Mr. Reynolds, the managing partner. His eyes scanned the lobby. When they landed on Maya, his face lit up. "Maya!" he called. "We've been looking forward to seeing you." The room shifted. The receptionist sat up straighter. The 3 young men stopped in their tracks. Maya stood and extended her hand, calm and composed. Mr. Reynolds shook it firmly. "Everyone, this is Maya Thompson, finalist from last year's Global Finance Challenge. She's already impressed half the board. Come on in, we've got the whole team waiting." Maya turned to follow him through the golden doors, but not before glancing over her shoulder. The receptionist looked stunned. The 3 young men looked like they'd seen a ghost. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just walked with purpose, because belonging isn't about who thinks you don't. It's about knowing you do, and Maya knew. When Maya was finally led into the interview room, the tension was immediate, thick and stifling, like a storm waiting to break. The space was sleek and cold, much like the lobby, chrome chairs, glass walls, a long black table. She stepped inside with confidence, but the reception she received made it clear this was not going to be easy. Seated, at the far end of the table were 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman. All were dressed impeccably, their expressions unreadable. But as Maya approached and offered polite greetings, she noticed subtle but telling signs. Raised eyebrows, exchanged glances, a hesitation to return her handshake. As she handed out copies of her resume, though they already had it printed in front of them, one of the men didn't even look at it. He slid it to the side without a glance. Another seemed far more interested in his wristwatch than in anything she had to say. His fingers drummed impatiently on the polished table. The only woman on the panel, a stern-looking executive with sleek hair and rimless glasses, broke the silence. "Are you sure you're in the right room?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "This interview is for the senior analyst role." Maya felt her stomach drop, but she didn't let it show. She'd heard that tone before, doubt disguised as curiosity. "Yes, I'm in the right room," she said evenly. "I'm here to interview for the senior analyst position. My background includes 5 years in strategic consulting and an MBA from Harvard." There was a beat of silence. Then one of the men leaned forward, arms crossed. "Do you even know what we do here?" he asked, his tone almost mocking. Maya inhaled deeply. She had prepared for this. Her mind clicked into gear as she launched into a concise yet thorough breakdown of the firm's portfolio strategies. She talked about their recent acquisition in the renewable energy sector, pointed out a declining trend in their tech investments, and suggested potential international markets that showed promising growth. She even cited the company's own quarterly report. Her delivery was calm, precise, and confident. She knew she was crushing it. But they weren't listening. The man who asked the question gave a vague nod and scribbled something in his notebook. The watch checker leaned back in his chair, stifling a yawn. The woman simply raised her brows as if unimpressed. Then, in a low voice, one of the men turned to another and said, "We need someone who fits our culture." Maya heard it. She was meant to. She had heard that phrase before, too. It was never about skill, never about qualifications. Fit meant familiar. Culture meant comfort. And Maya, a brilliant black woman with bold ambition and presence, made them uncomfortable. Still, she didn't flinch. She didn't stutter or shrink. She smiled. "Thank you all for your time," she said when the lukewarm Q&A ended. "I appreciate the opportunity." And with that, she stood, gathered her portfolio, and walked out of the room with grace. Her heels echoed across the floor, each step a quiet declaration. "I belong, even if you can't see it." She passed the receptionist again, who now sat awkwardly in silence, and pushed through the doors into the sunlight. Outside, Maya exhaled. It wasn't the opportunity she'd imagined, but it was a revelation. The room hadn't failed to see her potential. They had refused to, but their refusal was not her reflection. They were not her limit. They were just a hallway she had to pass through on the way to something greater, and she would get there, because she always did. 2 days later, Maya's phone rang. The caller ID didn't show HR or any of the names she recognized. It was simply labeled Executive Office. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Johnson," the voice said, calm and professional, "the CEO would like to meet with you in person, at our headquarters. Today, if possible." No explanation, no hint of what it was about, just a request that felt both sudden and serious, curious, and admittedly skeptical. Maya agreed. When she arrived at the firm's towering glass building once again, the atmosphere had shifted. The same receptionist who had mocked her just days earlier now stood as if at attention, face pale and posture stiff. "Ms. Johnson," she said with a slight bow of her head, "they're waiting for you in the executive boardroom." Maya raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She walked past the lobby, her steps calm and deliberate. As the heavy doors to the boardroom opened, Maya paused, then stepped inside. The room was full. The CEO stood at the head of the table, flanked by the full board of directors. And to the side, clearly uneasy, stood the 4 interviewers from her previous meeting. Everyone stood as she entered. Then, to her surprise, the CEO, a tall man with silver hair and a reputation for being stern, walked directly up to her, eyes steady. Then, he did something no one expected. He bowed his head. "I owe you a deep and sincere apology," he said, his voice solemn. "What happened to you in this building was unacceptable. It did not reflect the values we claim to stand for, and for that, I take full responsibility." The room was silent. Maya stood tall, composed, but her eyes burned, not with anger, but with clarity. This moment mattered. The CEO stood tall, his eyes fixed on Maya, but his voice carried through the room like a reckoning. "I reviewed your application personally," he said, "and then I watched the full footage of your interview. From the moment you stepped into this building, you were underestimated, dismissed, and disrespected." A hush fell over the room. I was shocked, not only by the unprofessionalism, but by the clear bias on display. You demonstrated excellence, composure, and vision under pressure. Not only are you more than qualified, Maya, you are exactly what this company needs. He turned slowly toward the stunned panel of interviewers. The woman stared down at her notepad, the watch checker shifted uncomfortably, and the man who had asked, "Do you even know what we do here?" now looked visibly pale. The CEO pointedly addressed them. "This is what bias looks like. This is how it operates, in silence, in smirks, in assumptions, and it ends today." Then he turned back to Maya, and his tone softened with something like admiration. "I don't believe in Band-Aid solutions," he said. "I believe in transformation. If you're willing to work with us to help build something better, I'd like to offer you a role much higher than what you applied for." Maya blinked, not sure she heard him correctly. The board members leaned in, expressions curious, some surprised, others seemingly impressed. "I want to make you the chairwoman of our newly created Diversity and Equity Investment Board," the CEO said clearly. "You'll have full authority to assemble your own team. You'll influence firm-wide strategy, audit our hiring and development pipelines, and advise directly to me and the board." He paused, letting the weight of his words land. "You'll ensure what happened to you, what's happened to so many others, never happens again in this company." Silence swept through the room like a wave. Maya's mouth opened slightly, then closed. For a moment, words escaped her. She had come expecting a formality, maybe an apology at best. But this was power. This was change. She looked around the room. The same space where decisions were made, strategies were built, futures determined. Now looking to her. A black woman. A Harvard grad. A veteran of bias and brilliance alike. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the truth of this moment. This wasn't just about her. It was bigger than her, bigger than the smug remarks in the lobby, the dismissive interview, or even this grand gesture. It was about every overlooked resume, every qualified voice drowned out in rooms like this one. Finally, she spoke. "I appreciate your words and the offer," she said carefully. "But if I accept this role, it won't be for show. I will ask difficult questions. I will challenge your systems. I will bring in people who don't look, think, or sound like what this board is used to." The CEO nodded. "That's exactly why I'm offering it to you." Maya looked at the panel one last time. They couldn't meet her eyes. Then she smiled. Not with arrogance, but with resolve. "Then I accept." A ripple of reaction moved through the room. Some nodded. A few even clapped softly. The CEO extended his hand, and Maya shook it, firm and unflinching. As she left the room, escorted now not by a receptionist but by a board assistant, she felt the shift. Not just in the building. In the narrative. This wasn't just a job. It was the start of a legacy. Maya accepted the role. It wasn't just a job. It was a statement. After enduring public humiliation at the hands of an outdated, out-of-touch executive panel, Maya chose not to walk away. Instead, she stepped up. And in doing so, she shattered every expectation they had of her. Within weeks, Maya began assembling her team. But this wasn't a typical round of corporate hiring. She reached out intentionally and boldly, drawing in professionals who had been consistently overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. People of color, women, LGBTQ+ individuals, those who had been made to feel invisible in boardrooms and decision-making spaces were now being brought to the forefront. She didn't just hire for optics. She hired for brilliance. Each member of her team brought fresh ideas, creative insight, and lived experiences that challenged the company's stagnant culture. Under Maya's leadership, the workplace transformed into an ecosystem of innovation, empathy, and excellence. Meanwhile, the old guard, the panel that had humiliated her, faced a reckoning. Maya didn't seek vengeance, but she demanded accountability. The executives were sent to mandatory inclusivity and bias training, and their decisions and behaviors were placed under formal review. For the first time in their careers, they were held responsible not just for financial outcomes, but for the culture they cultivated, or allowed to fester. Maya's first major initiative was nothing short of groundbreaking. She launched a bold campaign that rebranded the company as a forward-thinking, inclusive partner for modern clients. The message was clear. This wasn't the same company anymore. This was a new era. That initiative paid off. Within a few months, The company secured 3 major contracts, each worth millions. These deals came from organizations that valued the same things Maya championed: innovation, integrity, and inclusivity. The message had landed and it resonated. Her impact didn't stop at the company's bottom line. Maya herself became a symbol, not just of professional success, but of resilience. She turned a deeply painful moment of public humiliation into a launching pad for transformation. Where others might have retreated or retaliated, she led with vision and purpose. Her story went viral. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags bearing her name. Articles, think pieces, and podcasts highlighted her journey. But what touched people most wasn't the poetic justice or the corporate turnaround. It was Maya's grace, her refusal to sink to the level of those who once belittled her, her ability to rise and lift others as she climbed. From boardrooms to classrooms, from grassroots organizations to Fortune 500 companies, people shared her story. It became a case study in leadership programs and a rallying cry in diversity initiatives. Maya's journey offered proof that transformation is possible, not just for individuals, but for entire systems. When interviewed about her success, Maya didn't gloat. She didn't focus on the contracts, the virality, or the newfound recognition. Instead, she said simply, "I didn't do this to prove anyone wrong. I did it to prove what's possible when we choose courage over comfort." Maya's legacy had only just begun. What started as a personal stand became a collective movement, one that would ripple through industries, challenge old norms, and inspire a generation of leaders to follow her example, not because she got revenge, but because she turned humiliation into transformation. And in doing so, she changed everything. This wasn't just about one woman getting the last word. It was about rewriting the rules of power, respect, and leadership. So the next time someone underestimates you, remember Maya Johnson. Because one moment of injustice can lead to a lifetime of purpose.